Hello, everybody. Good morning. My name is Haddad. I'm the CEO at Turo. We're the leading peer-to-peer car sharing company here in the US. We started expanding internationally a couple years ago, so I'm going to speak to you about my experience over the last couple of years growing the company outside of the US. I've had a lot of experience actually with international businesses because I came to Turo 6.5 years ago after having spent many years at eBay, I'd argue one of the most successful marketplaces to have expanded in many, many markets around the world. I was actually there for almost 10 years, and I did a bunch of things there at eBay. eBay actually acquired a company that I had founded in Europe back in the late 1990s, the first wave of the internet. Also a marketplace company. It was the pioneer of online commerce back then in France and a few other countries in Europe called iBazaar. So when Dan and I talked about this conference, I was like, marketplaces, of course. You know, I've been living and breathing marketplaces for the last almost 20 years. I love marketplaces for so many reasons. And so I thought it would be fun for me to participate, and thank you for inviting me and letting me be part of this inaugural marketplace conference. So I have 20 minutes. There's lots to talk about. So the main topic that I thought we can focus on here around this notion of leveraging the network effect to scale internationally. Even within that topic, there's lots that we can talk about. And so I've decided to just focus on a few key points that, if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking at expanding your marketplace business outside of your home market, whether that home market is a whole country or whether that is a city or a region, what are some of the things that you want to consider going through before you make that decision, as well as how do you execute that initial few steps of that expansion? Because those are where I think a lot of missteps can happen, a lot of bad decisions can happen, and I thought I can contribute to avoiding, helping you avoid making those mistakes since I've made them, and I've seen at iBazaar we made them, at eBay we made them, at Turo we're trying to avoid making them, so I'm trying to share the wisdom. So first of all, a bit of our scaling journey to date. Turo has been around for almost 7 years now, and we've been growing the business. It's a marketplace business. If you haven't used us yet, we're a peer-to-peer car sharing marketplace. So people can list their cars and monetize their cars, and then travelers can rent those cars instead of renting them on traditional rental car companies. So our scaling journey to date has been a fun one. When we started, and even back in 2012, we had only a few thousand users. When I listed my 911 on Turo in 2012, it was listing number 279, and now we've got many more users. We crossed the 5 million users at the end of last year. We crossed the 200,000 vehicle listings at the end of last year. And we also crossed an important milestone in terms of days of bookings, 4 million last year. So we're seeing very strong growth of the business, and very excited about that business. And of course, one of the things that I've always aspired to with Turo is how do we build a global company? Because I've been part of global companies. I think global companies are really fun to build and to manage. They're obviously very rewarding if you can pull it off. And so I've always been thinking in the back of my mind, even back in 2012, like when are we going to start expanding outside of our home market, which is the US market? And had gone through a lot of sort of series of thinking about the when and the how, and how do we execute it. Especially that, and this is something that you want to think about, what is your company's ultimate mission? We think that our mission at Turo is to put the world's 1 billion plus cars to better use. So intrinsically, as part of our mission, there's a global element to it. We think there's a universal need here, which is to turn the car from a cost center into an earnings engine. And we think that really applies across the world. It's not just a US thing. It's not just a advanced economies thing. It's really something that can work everywhere. Obviously, the US is a huge starting point because we've got almost 300 million cars in the US. And so we probably have the highest ratio of car ownership and idle cars out there. And so it's a great place to start. But really, it's not just a US thing. Our mission by nature is a global thing. And so First of all, think about your mission as a company, as a marketplace. Is it global, or is it more national or local? And different marketplaces may be more or less advanced on that dimension. And we felt very strongly that our mission from day one was very much a global one. So what's the network effect? Just to make sure that we're talking about the same thing, different people have different definitions for the network effect. For me, the definition is very simple. The network effect in a marketplace is this nice little cycle that starts very, 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 very slowly. It's very, very, very painful in the very first few days and weeks and months of a marketplace business, where at the beginning you built this great software platform, but we all know that software is only part of the secret sauce of building a successful marketplace business. It's not just about the software, it's about building the actual supply and demand. And so that network effect starts very slowly in a marketplace. And a lot of marketplaces don't reach the velocity of the network effect that enables them to take off. And so I think about when you're building a marketplace, it's like you're running and you're going to jump from one mountain to another, and you have to have enough of that momentum in order to get to the next hill and not fall and injure yourself or kill yourself. And so you got to raise enough capital effectively. The momentum here is capital. You got to have the right team in order to execute, in order to make that jump. And ultimately, you see the network effect in conversion. And so, I've also invested in a lot of marketplace businesses over the last few years, and I've helped advise a lot of marketplace companies and founders, and I love to do that. The central thing is really conversion. Is there conversion in the marketplace, and where is this conversion headed? Are we able to match supply and demand, and is that network effect going? We started Turo in Germany just a couple of months ago, and our conversion in the first week is 0. We started with 0 cars. So you also have to have that belief that you're going to be able to figure out how to create that momentum, because initially you're going to start with a conversion rate of 0 in a marketplace. And so how do you get that flywheel going, I think is a whole separate topic. I don't want to spend too much time on it. But one thing that's interesting to note here as related to the international element is, do you believe that the network effect is a local network effect, a national one, or an international one? And different marketplaces are very different on that dimension. So let me tell you a little bit about my experience at eBay. At eBay for a very long time, the network effect was purely national. The fact that eBay was so strong in the US didn't translate into eBay being so strong anywhere else. In fact, that's the reason why eBay decided to acquire my company, iBazaar, because we were much stronger in the markets that we are in Europe. And why did the network effect of eBay in the US not translate or not spill over outside of the US? For many reasons, but the particular reason is that it's actually hard for consumers to buy and sell from one another across borders, right? There's a lot of friction for cross-border selling and buying when you're just an individual consumer. If you're an individual seller selling your iPhone, back then it was your iPod, and you wanted to list it out there for sale, you may get some demand from overseas, but it's actually kind of a hassle to figure out how to do international payments and international shipping and figure out customs. And of course, all of these elements of friction end up adding more costs to the transaction, which makes it less attractive for the seller in a marketplace like eBay to conduct, and for a buyer as well, right? It's not as attractive. So then, the main elements that were more international from a network effect standpoint for eBay were really the unique items, the incredibly unique items that you could only find on eBay, and where people were not value conscious. They were not, they were just desperate to get that, thing that was only available, and that's where you got some international trading. So for a very long time, when I was at eBay, when we looked at the GMV of the marketplace and looked at that cross-border GMV, it was tiny. It was less than 5% for a long time, and it was growing a little bit, less than 10% when I left 7 years ago. The reason is, of course, there's a lot of that friction in that commercial transaction. fast forward with a marketplace like Airbnb. So I'm also a host on Airbnb. We still have our place in France, and so we participate in the sharing economy across all borders. And I would estimate that more than 3/4 of my guests that are renting my place in Paris are international travelers to France, to Paris. Very few local travelers. And as part of sort of understanding the network effect at Airbnb, our understanding is that the vast majority of the business at Airbnb is cross-border, not local, not domestic only. It's cross-border. The reason, of course, why that model is very interesting from a network effect, international network effect standpoint, is there's no friction, right? The traveler who's visiting another country, they're going to be there. There isn't additional cost of servicing that guest that's coming from overseas versus a guest that might be coming from the same country. There isn't that level of friction that exists in e-commerce. And so thinking about your marketplace business and the nature of the network effect and sort of how local it is versus national versus international can really play a very important role in how aggressively you want to pursue international expansion as a marketplace business. And for us, we believe that for Turo, we believe that our network effect is not just local, not just national, it's also international, because we're also in the travel business. And so we've been really interested in pursuing kind of international expansion for a long time. Now, being interested in pursuing international expansion doesn't mean that you should do it. The network effect isn't enough. And so when do you start thinking about, now this is actually a realistic thing to consider? I would simplify it to two key decisions around, your product market fit and your economics. The way I think about product market fit is, are you seeing a very strong organic growth of the business in your initial market? So for us in the US, we've been seeing 3x revenue growth year over year for many years, and we felt confident that we have achieved an important part of that product market fit. But growth isn't enough, right? There's been a lot of stories, especially in the marketplace world, of a lot of marketplace businesses that have grown very fast, but with unsustainable unit economics, right? And so thinking about the unit economics and being honest about what your unit economics are and making sure that you're understanding the trajectory of those is really critical. The way we think about our unit economics is we just look at our LTV divided by CAC, and are we 3x or more? And it's a real LTV. It's based on actual contribution margins. So don't play with the numbers. The CAC is fully, it's fully loaded. It's the cost of acquiring both the supply side and the demand side, not just the demand side, not just the supply side. I've been part of a lot of pitches of marketplace businesses where LTVs were based on revenue, or unit economics were based on very superficial gross margins. So you got to look at the actual inherent economics of the business, and once you have that situation where you feel like the growth is very strong, the unit economics are there, you then look at the actual implementation of your international expansion. So look at the product market fit readiness. Does the international accelerate network effects? That's a big part of the what's the nature of the network effect? Is it local? Is it national? Is it international? For us, the answer to that question was yes. And then thirdly, are you seeing a lot of local competitors that are copying your model in different marketplaces around the world? And how strongly do you feel you want to be in there to preempt that copy pasting of your model, which we've seen for Turo. We've seen a lot of companies do a great job executing our model in different countries. And so you wire away in that readiness and then the attractiveness of that decision. And then, of course, I think once you've made that rational decision, there are lots of emotional decisions that come to with international expansion. Lots of irrational fears and a lot of, I'd say, investor fears. Especially if you're a US startup with a primarily US board, there's always the question of, well, what about distraction? You know, the US market is such a huge market. Why do we want to go out and pursue other markets? And is that going to distract us from the core market, which is the US market? You know, there's going to be additional capital that's required, right? You're going to increase the burn, and you're going to delay the point of profitability for the business because you're going to be investing in, you know, in these new markets that you're going to opening, and the conversion rates, as we talked about, is going to be very low initially, and so the return on those new markets is going to be very low. And then there's always this, you know, the fear of the unknown. You know, when you're based in the U.S., you know, so you understand the U.S. system well, and if you don't have a lot of exposure to, you know, international markets, you're wondering, you know, are these markets going to behave the same way as the U.S. market? Are there cultural differences? You know, all those, you know, sort of emotional, non-rational decisions that come into play. And, you know, it took me, I'd say, a couple of years of conversation with our board to get everybody on board with the team as well. And so you gotta treat those seriously. It's not just a rational decision. It's also an emotional decision to get outside of the market. And then finally, I'm getting the 5 minutes. Once you've decided to take the plunge, you gotta figure out a way to get organized in a smart way to execute that international expansion. The first thing to jump to mind here is investing in a local team. I think creating that local team that is going to be empowered to drive the growth in that new market, it's critical. So we have a great team based in Canada. We have a great team based in the UK. We have a great team based in Germany. And we really try to invest a lot in building that team and ensuring that the team can execute without too much intervention and too much sort of support from the headquarters team. Focus on your first 1,000 customers. You know, outstanding experience for that first 1,000 customers. This is how, you know, the network effect starts getting built. This is how word of mouth for a marketplace starts, you know, going through, you know, that cycle of the network. It's focus on the first 1,000 customers and do a lot of unscalable things for the first 1,000 customers, including over-investing in customer service, over-investing in, you know, ensuring that everyone's really delighted with their first experience. Then, of course, you want to, you know, start the marketing engine going. We found public relations, PR, is a big part of, you know, driving the network effect. And then, of course, scaling marketing, and of course, then becoming an international organization. I'm out of time.